What is the worst thing you've ever seen happen at a wedding? At a cousin's wedding, my uncle was smashed and thought he'd had a stroke in the bathroom as he couldn't straighten himself. Turned out he'd buttoned his waistcoat to his trousers and couldn't stand up. I was an event manager at a mansion that did a lot of weddings, so I've seen my fair share of wedding shit shows. My favorite is probably the one where the entire wedding party started drinking at noon for a 6 p.m. wedding. The groom passed out around 5 and we couldn't get him up. So I made him a ham sandwich and propped him up in his bed while I hand-fed him. Managed to get him and his boys down to the courtyard and then had to run back in and herd the women down. The bride spilled her mimosa all over her dress. 2 of the bridesmaids couldn't find their shoes, but everyone was super happy and nice. There were about 150 people at the reception and every single one of them got absolutely hammered. The mother of the bride kept sneaking up on me, hugging me, and the groom made me pose for some photos with them. They also gave me all the leftover wedding cake and a few bottles of wine. I miss them. During the best man speech, the best man proposed to the maid of honor. Totally stole the night from the bride and groom. Now the best man and maid of honor are in the process of divorcing. At my own wedding reception, I saw my wife's grandma, who was about 98, very slowly and with a terrible sense of inevitability fall sideways off her chair. She remained in a sitting position but just slowly tilted sideways till she was on the floor, still in the exact same pose. It sounds shitty, but all I could think was, fuck's sake, don't die at our wedding, please don't die at our wedding. Luckily she was fine, and lived for another few years to see her 100th birthday. Edit. Gee whiz, my top-rated comment ever is about that time I thought my wife's grandma died at our wedding. Thanks for the karma, Grandma Mary. Was at a wedding this summer. The groom's family absolutely tore their son, brother apart during the speeches. They didn't say one loving thing, and went on to talk about all the mistakes he made during this life. The worst thing they brought up was how he was responsible for a car accident that put someone in a coma. I was cringing. At the reception, the bride received a tip to go out to the parking lot where she found her new husband making out with his ex-GF. The ensuing fight came inside the hall and the party screeched to a halt. Both families were displeased and stuck him with a lot of bills. We kept our gift. Bride's stepmother and mother got into a fight. Stepmother bit the mother. Wedding went to a screeching halt. Removed. One of my best friend's weddings. The groom got so drunk that he straight disappeared from the reception. Shit got real awkward when it was time for the wedding to be over. The venue was kicking us out and the bride and groom were supposed to take off in their vintage car and drive off to their honeymoon suite. The music went off, lights went on, and it turned into the guests searching for the damn groom. My husband finally found him in the parking lot, basically face down on his lips. He helped him back into the wedding, which was basically the most awkward walk of shame past the bride's glaring dad and grandfather. The groom was too drunk to drive. Bride's grandfather drove them to the hotel suite, which was a 30-minute drive. My friend, the bride, later told me that when they got in the room, her new husband passed out cold on the bed and she had to wander the halls in her wedding dress looking for someone to unhook her dress for her so she could get out of it. I was an attendant in my best friend's wedding. Her father walked her down the aisle and while he was not visibly drunk, he had a hard time walking behind her to sit in the pew. He stepped on her dress, ripping it from her back down to her ass. Her thong was red. They had to stop the wedding so that she could find safety pins. Removed. For the bouquet toss, a middle-aged guy forced his middle-aged girlfriend out onto the floor, then stood by her so she couldn't leave. The bouquet was caught by an excited little girl. The guy proceeded to yank the bouquet out of the little girl's hands, gave it to his middle-aged girlfriend, then ran off the floor cheering loudly to high-five one of his buddies. The little girl ran away crying. Groom got really drunk, trashed the suite, and got tased by the police before being arrested. Just as the bride started walking down the aisle, her grandmother had a sudden cardiac event. We had to stop the procession and start CPR in the aisleway. What's worse is that we were in a large park, and people calling 911 couldn't give the address. I ran to the ranger station, but it was locked. I broke a window screen and crawled through to use the landline EMS could trace and respond. She didn't make it. As an added bonus to the horrible situation, I later found out the ranger had placed a hidden camera in the women's restroom where the girls got ready, dressed for the wedding. He served jail time. I've said this before on here, but they didn't have any tables or chairs. We had nowhere to sit or to put our plates down. Everyone had to hold their food standing up and put their drinks down on the ground. Since there were no chairs to make an aisle for her to walk down, she just kind of strolled through the crowd while people were confused and talking. "Where are the chairs?" was the theme of the wedding. I was a close friend, so our group sent me to ask her why there were no tables and chairs, and she simply said, "Oh, you have to pay extra for that." The grandmother of the bride died. At the reception, she was dancing and having fun and then just collapsed. The bride and groom did amazingly. Grandmother was quite elderly and sick. They waited with her for the ambulance and quickly told everyone she was all right and on her way to the hospital. Everyone was slightly worried and had thought the evening had just gotten to her. Nope, she had passed away right there, as I found out after the reception was over and her and I were cleaning up the hall together. Also, groom was terminal. He was given 6 months about a week before the wedding. He survived about 3 months afterwards. Happiest thing is the bride was pregnant with his child and gave birth to a lovely daughter. She has since remarried, but my goodness, a widow 3 months after the marriage with a newborn. No, she didn't get a huge life insurance policy either. That woman is strong as nails. There was like an 8-year-old boy who had loads of confetti in his hand, so I didn't think much of it. Turns out he thought it was sugar paper and ate all of. He then proceeded to projectile vomit everywhere through the middle of the ceremony. Was one of the funniest and most disgusting moments of my life. There was this guy outside of the hotel walking up to groups of people in the smoking area, asking how much each person weighed. He was very overweight himself, and his jeans looked to be on inside out. He was severely underdressed for the occasion, and no one seemed to know him. Anyways, he would ask a person's weight, and then exclaim, "I can bench that." Until one guy, I think he was a family member of the bride, got into an argument with him and started asking around if anyone knew this person, figuring that he was a wedding crasher. That's when this gentleman decided to cut a deal with everyone. "If I can pick up that bench with my bare hands, can I stay for the party?" To which everyone agrees, because the bench was clearly bolted to the ground. So, he walks over, puts his hands on the bench, crouches down, and with all of his might, shits his pants in front of everyone. He stood up and waddled off through the parking lot to never be seen again. I did hear throughout the night people talking about a guy who was on shrooms outside, trying to lift a bench. So, I guess he was also tripping balls. Ex-boyfriend of the bride got super drunk at the reception and started rambling loudly, heard by half the reception hall, about how the marriage was wrong and how she was the love of his life. He was there with his then new, presumably imminently ex-girlfriend. Fuck knows why she invited him. Friend's wedding. The bride's nephew, about 7, I think, was the ring bearer. Instead of sitting at the front after he made it down the aisle, he decided to do karate moves in front of, and sometimes behind, the couple during the entire ceremony. He's in almost all their photos. Bridal face plant followed by a girdle breaking, which led to the dress ripping. We were partying in Puerto Vallarta, and there was a beautiful wedding going on at the hotel next door. A friend of mine was pretty drunk, then just sprinted for the wedding. He hopped the wall, blasted through the seating arrangements, then body slammed the 6-foot-tall wedding cake. He spent the next 2 days in Mexican jail, and will forever be a fucking prick in my heart. My cousin's mother-in-law told my cousin that her dress was ugly and then called the next day to ask if they had sex. Super awkward. My cousin is super religious and modest and was waiting for her wedding night to do anything, so it was extremely embarrassing for her. Bridesmaid had a seizure just as the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride." My dad's friend's son got married when I was a teenager. He's a really cool guy and we played Nintendo a lot whenever we visited. Anyway, the embarrassing story is about his bride. She decided that she wanted to sing to him at one point during the ceremony, so she chose the song, "Wind Beneath My Wings" by Bette Midler. Midler is an alto. The bride was a high soprano. Unfortunately, she couldn't sing very well, either. So for several minutes she squeaks this song out while he's standing there with the most awkward look on his face. I think everyone felt embarrassed. I know I did. The good thing is that they're still happily married and have a daughter. My husband and I got the screaming giggles during the vows, and accidentally whacked our heads together. My friend got married around age 21. Neither he nor the bride had much money, so the wedding was modest but still very nice. They did have a lovely 3-tier cake though. The ceremony goes fine and the bride will cut the cake, music is playing. She was a dainty, tiny little thing, maybe 5 feet 2 inches and 100 pounds soaking wet. If she swatted a fly it might not even notice. She approaches the cake with the knife, barely touches it and boom. The whole thing immediately collapses, all 3 tiers somehow, all over someone's elderly grandmother who was seated right by the ill-fated cake. That old lady, who had barely moved throughout the whole affair, shot out of her chair like she was fired from a cannon, screeching bloody goddamned murder and sending cake shrapnel all over those nearby. Another close friend and I watched the whole thing from close range and were paralyzed and purple from hysterical breathless laughter, as were many of the other guests. I later heard the bakery refunded them for the cake due to its not up to code construction. They should have charged them double for generating memories that no one there will ever forget. After arriving 45 minutes after the ceremony was to begin, during the ring exchange, the groom gets this blank look and says he didn't know he was supposed to buy her another ring. Syl slipped off her wedding band and handed it off to the preacher. My husband's brother having a seaside wedding. Our almost 2-year-old was the ring bearer. He passed off the rings to the best man, Dad, then toddled away. Off the cliff. It was prob a 60 to 80 drop to the beach below, but he luckily got caught up in the bushes, and husband snatched him up. He was buckled into his stroller after that, kamikaze kid. I worked at a wedding venue for 4 years. Having to stop a bride's stepdad from hitting her over the head with a chair was a highlight. The whole room were just fighting with each other. The best man kicked the mother-in-law. Different wedding. Some dickhead bit the DJ because he refused to play a certain song. For me, the absolute worst one was when the newlyweds were arguing at the end of the night. In front of their young son, she admitted to cheating on him. It all came out there and then in front of his family and he was devastated.